So let me introduce Scott Kidd. I know that some of you have heard him speak before. He was a frequent speaker, I believe, at Job Seekers Network. He is a career ownership coach. He's called the Entrepreneurs, or his company is called the Entrepreneur's Choice. Born and raised in Ohio, he has a degree in chemical engineering and an MBA from the University of Texas. He has worked in management at 3M and HEB. His last position prior to starting his current business was as a successful software startup in San Antonio. He now helps people explore business ownership to see if it's a good path for them. He resides in Spring Branch, Texas with his wife, Juliana, and 3 dogs. He has 2 children that are working after graduating from Texas Tech, another who is going to school, and one working in Nebraska, and 2 beautiful granddaughters. His passion is to help others find a good place in their career. So no more delay. Let me just introduce, let's give him a virtual round of applause to Scott Kidd.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for your introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak with you guys today. We are in kind of a very unusual time in the life of careers and the workplace in America. So I think this is a particularly great time to think about what options you have and where you really want to be in your career as you move forward. So let me go ahead and share my slides here. So today we're going to talk about a little different path, which would be business ownership. So is that a path for you at this point that would be a good path to explore? And in terms of my background, as you said, I've got an engineering degree and got an MBA from Texas, but where I kind of grew up and learned about business was in at 3M and HEB in the management there. And my most recent position was with a tech startup, a software startup in San Antonio. And what we did is we developed software that analyzed auto accidents from an engineering and medical perspective. So that kind of got me in the bug of owning a business and being a business owner. And in that business, we worked really hard for a very long time to develop our product and get acquired by another company. And I decided I wanted to do something for myself and actually go out on my own. And that's when I became a franchise and business coach, and that was 8 years ago. So I enjoy helping people explore their career and options in business ownership, if that's a good path for them. So why do people look at business ownership, and why is that something that you might want to consider as an alternative now? Well, 75% of the people have thought about becoming self-sufficient and doing something for themselves, and only about 5% actually ending up doing that. So, as you're looking at your opportunities now and places you can go and do, maybe perhaps it's time to reevaluate what you want out of your career. And I think there'll be opportunities to change the direction you're going if that's something that'd be interesting for you. So why do only 5% actually end up doing it? Well, there's some hurdles. So one is, finances. Sometimes that's a concern about your current situation and finances and being able to withstand the startup of a business. And some of it may be financing the business itself. We'll actually talk about that and how that works and what your possibilities are there. For a lot of people, most of us, for most of our lives, we've worked for someone else. So there's some perceived job security with respect to the job. And I don't think a lot of people saw what is currently happening, saw that coming. And it's kind of been a big shakeup in terms of job security. So while there is some job security, it may not be absolute. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average job right now is about 4.5 years. So if you get a job today, it's likely that in 4.5 years, you'll be actually looking for another position, whether that's because you want to do it or because you're kind of being forced to do it. And this is a little off topic, but one of the things I would recommend that you think about is when you land that next position, start networking. After you've been in there for a little while, maybe 6 to 12 months, I would encourage you to start networking to find the next position, so that when you are ready to change, it's up to you and perhaps not up to the company. And network with people that either in the organization that you're in, that you want to be at that next level, maybe next position, or network with people externally to get contacts and people who will support you if you're wanting to go to another organization. The third thing is benefits. So health benefits are very important in today's world, and a lot of people are concerned about not having benefits if they would go into doing a business of their own. There are ways to give benefits, and you might be surprised that it's not that much more expensive than the benefits you receive from your employer, unless your employer totally sponsors you for those benefits. But oftentimes it's largely different. But the biggest thing is fear. Like I said, most people have not ever done a business for themselves, and fear can be an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And a lot of times that's because there's perceptions about business ownership, about people's success rate in business ownership, and whether or not you have the right stuff perhaps to do a business. And so what I would encourage you to do or think about is, instead of letting perceptions and fear drive that thought process, is to gather information and learn. And the more you learn, the more you may find that actually it is a path that's viable or that might be helpful for you. And if you don't, that's okay, because at that point you've learned and gathered information and made an informed decision. You've not kind of let the perceptions run wild and take you away from something and give you kind of a false start in terms of looking at an alternative might be a good pathway. So why do people end up doing it? What do those 5% find? Well, one big reason why people do it is they want control of their career and destiny. I'm working with a gentleman right now who is in sales, and this change, this shutdown, has significantly affected his ability to make money this year. And he didn't do anything to make that happen. The company made a decision to change, to basically not sell, even though he doesn't have to be there directly to sell to clients or to maintain clients. And so he's kind of lost his control of his career and his ability to make money. And he would like to have that ability. And a lot of people want that ability as well. Another reason is making money for yourself instead of other people. Again, a lot of salespeople have sold a lot of product for other businesses and made a lot of other people money, but they haven't fully participated in that that process. And so they want to be able to have more control over their earning and how, if they put in a lot of work, they get compensated for that work. The third thing is meeting financial goals. And that can be both short-term and long-term. In the short term, maybe there's limitations in terms of your compensation or growth within an organization. And so that limits your financial ability to make money. And longer term, it may affect your ability to retire and to have retirement funds to do what you want to do in retirement. And then another reason would be flexibility of schedule. I think a lot of people, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but you do have to put time in to grow a business. And I think a lot of people are concerned that will take more time than what they're doing now. But oftentimes there's flexibility in the schedule. So if you want to go see a ball game or a child's play or something, as the business owner, you have some flexibility oftentimes in the schedule to be able to do that, whereas an employer, may not have as much compassion or they may need you there and not allow you to be able to go do that. So those are some of the main reasons that people end up doing something for themselves. So the challenge of all this is there's a lot of options and possibilities, and oftentimes that in and of itself is kind of a daunting task. And in the real world, if you will, the job world, a lot of times you have a skill set that is very valuable, but because you've not done it in a certain industry or in a certain manner, the employer kind of discounts that skill set. And so one of the things we'll talk about is using your skill set and using the abilities that you have to be successful in business. But when you're looking at business ownership, the details count. So the details about the business, how it operates, the lifestyle of the business, the ability to grow that business, all those sorts of things count. And then the fit to you is very important as well. And so, we're looking at things like the skill set. What do you want your work-life balance to be? What kind of income would you expect from the business? What kind of investment level are you able to participate in and be comfortable with? And then where it really gets sticky is when we get to making decisions and taking action. Because at some point, you're going to have to make some decisions about what it is that you want to do and what you're going to need to do to go into business, and then you actually have to do it. And when we get to that action point, a lot of people get hung up because that's kind of, now it's getting real. All this looking at businesses is all well and good, but when you're having to take actions and maybe put out a little bit of money to invest in the business, then that's when it gets a little scarier, and that's okay. And it's okay that it's not, it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, because that's very normal. And almost everyone goes through that. So it's not, you're not the only one who's ever faced that. So, we are in a crazy environment right now, and that the business environment has changed drastically, and for some it hasn't. So in terms of some of the top industries that have been affected, obviously leisure and hospitality, bars, restaurants, amusement parks, those sorts of things, those kind of things that are fun to do are really being affected by the shutdowns throughout the country. Healthcare has been a big change, and I heard Kathy talk about that earlier, that there's going to be opportunities in healthcare because of some of the things that we weren't able to do during the shutdown. Professional business services, providing services for other businesses may not be as needed, although there'll be some exceptions we'll talk about. Retail, obviously, and airlines and travel have been affected very much by the shutdown. But there have been some businesses that haven't been affected. I actually talked to a lot of people during the week on LinkedIn, and in talking to people and kind of seeing how they're doing, I don't know the exact number, but my guess is about 80% or more of the people that I've talked to are actually working. They may not be working in the office, but their business is still going. They've still been working. They may be working from home, depending on the business. So, there are a lot of people unemployed, and there will be businesses that shut down, but there are people still out there working and maybe needing new folks. So I would take heart by that. And there are some businesses that haven't been affected. So as an example, there are service businesses that are still very much needed. For example, pest control or plumbers, those sorts of folks, people still need those services done for them. And there are actually businesses that are thriving in this environment. So as an example, there's a business of what they do is they go in and sanitize a business, restaurants, et cetera, for viruses and other things. And they do that on a regular basis. Well, you can imagine now how important those are and how much business they're getting because of what's going on, because people really are aware of that now. Shipping stores, people are still shipping stuff, people are still receiving stuff, they're still getting mail. Takeout food, obviously, that was the only game in town here for quite a while. And so especially pizza places, pizza businesses have been really thriving in the shutdown because people, in some respects, for a lot of people, pizza is a comfort food. And so, people really want to be able to have a meal that they don't have to fix. So those businesses have done well as well. And one thing to think about in the environment is there will be businesses that don't come back. A lot of those businesses may have been weak in their field, or they will struggle going forward because they're not a well-run business or a good competitor in that industry. And because of that, the people that they serve will need someone to serve them. And if you can go in and serve them and do a good job of that and are successful, are a good person at running a business, that will provide some opportunities to you to potentially open a business in that field. And what I would suggest you think about is business ownership is an investment. And it's like a stock or bond as an example, but you have a little bit more say-so and control over that investment. You have the ability to affect the results of what happens. You can put in effort to change what happens. You can't really do that with Pepsi or Coke. You don't really have a lot of say-so on what the board decides or how they manage their business or whatever. You're kind of hoping that they will do the right thing and manage the business well so the stock goes up. With business ownership, you have more control of that. When you're thinking about business ownership, there needs to be a market for the product or service. And so, it might be, you might have a real passion for socks for cats or something like that, but are there enough people out there that really want that type of product or service? And you really need to think about a niche within a market. So, as a plumber, as an example, you can do a lot of different things and have a lot of different clients as a plumber, but usually being all things to all people and trying to cover the whole market is not a successful strategy. You need to find a niche that you're very good at, and you do a very good job of serving that niche. And then the other thing is the outlook for the product or service. You don't really want to have a product or service that is not going to be viable going forward or can be outsourced or something of that nature. So you want to make sure that the product or service has a long future for it. And then the other thing to think about, because a business is an investment, is when to sell the investment. So if you buy a stock or bond, typically you're going to think about a time at which you've made the money you want to make on that stock, and you need to kind of reevaluate what you want to do with the stock. Do I sell it or do I keep it? Same thing with the business ownership. And different businesses have different capabilities to build value or equity in the business. If you have a book of business that people can see, they're oftentimes see value in that. If you don't have a book of business, then it may not be as valuable to them. And you need to have goals for the business and reevaluate those over time. So if you get to certain milestones within the business, you may decide that, you've made what you're going to make on the business, and maybe it's more difficult to grow it further, or you're at a point in your career which you don't want to do that. At that point, you might want to think about selling it and taking advantage of the business you built up. All right, before we get into options to start a business, does anyone have any questions, or are there any questions on the chat for what we've just covered?
We
Okay.
don't have any questions yet.
All right, Kathy. All right, so what are your options in terms of starting a business? There's really kind of three main ways that you can start a business. You can.
Oh, we did just get a question.
Okay, Kathy, go ahead.
Which is, how do you price out a service offering for, say, career coaching?
Well, I don't know exactly what the market would be for that. In my case, I don't charge for what I do, but I'm sure that other coaches have different ways that they approach it. And usually, I'm guessing it's more like a consulting engagement, where you would pay maybe a monthly fee to have an ongoing conversation with them. When I did business coaching, that's kind of how it worked. Is there was kind of an ongoing fee per month that, and you can, in my case, you could opt out at any time in terms of that engagement. But other business coaches may, or career coaches may address that a little bit differently. But most of them, I will say this, most of them will have a conversation with you to learn about where you are in your career, what you're doing, what you want to accomplish, and kind of get some background before they would take you on as a client. And usually that's a free consultation. So I would encourage you to reach out and just gather information, see what it would be like. Good question.
We have another one that says, could you speak to how to start a freelancing business without having hundreds of dollars for a coach?
Yeah, and we'll talk, when I talk about starting a business independently, we'll talk a little bit about that. But you can start businesses on your own without having assistance, but we'll talk about a little bit about what you need to think about in terms of starting that independent business. And if you can do those things on your own, then by all means go forth. But if you're concerned about some of those areas, it might help to have a coach or other resources to help you think through those ideas. And you may not need a coach per se, but there are free resources that we'll talk about during the presentation that may be of help to you.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So the three main ways that you can start a business would be to buy an existing business that's already established. You can start a business independently, where you're starting from scratch and creating the business from scratch. Or you can purchase a franchise type business that kind of is a little, almost a combination of both of those. So we'll talk about each of those. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each. So to purchasing a business is kind of an interesting idea. The advantages of purchasing an existing business is that you typically have an established track record and reputation. You kind of know what the business has been doing in the past. You should have existing customers, and hopefully you're going to have immediate cash flow in that it's cash positive. The business is actually making money or profits. there's kind of a lower perceived risk because it is a bit of a known quantity. And so you're not totally jumping off and doing something from scratch. You oftentimes have trained employees and established suppliers. And one of the nice things about an established business is that it may be easier to get funding to buy it because a bank can look at that and see what the track record has been, what the history has been, and kind of gets an idea of the risk of the business. Banks are usually very risk averse, and so they're not really eager to lend into something that's very risky, and especially if they don't know what the risk is. So if they know what the track record is, they may be more willing to lend into that. So the concerns about that is, you know, when you're looking at a business, someone's selling it for a reason. So the question is, why are they selling it? And can you figure out exactly why they're selling it and what that means for you? So it may be, depending on the business, it may be hard to really determine the value, and depending on how they keep their records, you may not have a full picture of what has been going on with the business. And typically you're going to have one or two situations. If it's a good business, you're typically going to pay a premium for that business. They're going to want to get the value for the equity that they've built in the business. And so therefore they may want a premium for someone to buy that business. The other situation would be that the business is not doing well and you're getting a deal on the business. Well, if you're getting a deal, the question is what's wrong with it, or what needs to be fixed, and can you fix it? And you know, in that situation, if you can fix it, that actually might be a very attractive opportunity. But you kind of have to be aware of what's happening and why it's being sold. Sometimes there's some goodwill in the business. In other words, there may be customers that have gone to Joe for 20 years because Joe has run the business and they like dealing with Joe. And when Joe is gone, there might be a certain group of customers that decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to go down the street and try somebody else because Joe's not there anymore. And the new guy's just, I don't know him. But bottom line is, even if the business is a deal, the question is it a good fit for you? Is it a good fit for your talent set, for what you want the business to accomplish for you? All those sorts of things that would go into owning a business. Is that the business for sale a good fit for you? If it is, then that might be a good path to explore. Secondly, then it would be independent business, to start something from scratch. That's kind of the American dream. Everybody wants to create their own business and do their own thing. Nice thing about that is you can do it the way that you want it. You have total control of the product, the process, the marketing, the financing, etc. And so it's all yours, and you have the ability to do it the way you want it. Unlike a franchise, there's no fees to get in the business and there's no royalties to pay. However, when you're starting an independent business, if it's a real business, not kind of a hobby, which we'll talk about, there is going to be some investment in that business as well. It's not cost-free. Some of the concerns or questions about that is you have to create a marketable product or service, like we talked about before. It has to be something that helps people in their daily lives, in making things easier for them, that creates fun and excitement for them, or whatever. It has to be something that people value and that they're willing to pay for. You have to have know-how to operate the business. So you need, basically, when you open it on your own, you have to get everything right. You have to get the operations right, the funding right, the marketing right, and you have to be able to do those things to have a successful business. And you need to be able to create a plan for the business, a business plan. One of the things that people sometimes do when they open their own business is they get caught up in the weeds. And what I mean by that is they get so busy providing the product or service that they don't spend time thinking about, well, what do I need to do to grow this business? What am I doing right and what am I doing wrong? And what do I need to change to make the business better or grow? And you really need to be able to do that to make sure that the business is successful over the long term, because conditions change and things change in the world, and that oftentimes changes how you need to approach things with your business. You really need to be able to do it all on your own, and you have to have the comfort level with taking risks, because this, of the three things we'll talk about, is probably the most risky of all businesses. You've heard the statistics that 80% of small businesses fail within the first 3 to 5 years. They're talking about this type of business, because if you don't, as I said before, if you don't get one of the areas right, so let's say finance or operations, even though the other areas are going well, that can drag the business down and ultimately make it fail because it's not right. And so you need to make sure that everything works the way it needs to work. And because it's an independent business, banks may not understand the risk profile. They may not have seen that type of business before, or they may not have seen you as the owner of that type of business. And so they may not be real keen on lending into that type of business. So if you're going to do an independent business, and even if you're going to do freelancing, as we talked about earlier, you need to have a business plan. You need to think through how the business is going to operate, have some contingencies and have some milestones that you need to achieve in order to get the business to where you want it to be, to make it grow the way you want it to grow. You need to know your unique selling proposition. So what makes you different? What makes your product or service different? And why should people choose you over the other competitors or similar type products or service that are in the marketplace? As we talked about before, you need to know your market and your niche within the market. So are you going to service small businesses or large businesses? What kind of service are you going to provide? Are you going to do mobile service or have people come to you? All sorts of things go into that kind of positioning. But what is it that you're going to excel at, and will you be known for in the marketplace? Sometimes businesses have locations, and I would strongly consider getting some help in finding the right location, because if that's a key factor in your success, you don't want to wing that. A lot of times people will go and look at a location and maybe there's a lot of traffic past there. But as an example, maybe during rush hour, it's so crowded that people don't even want to go in there to be in that area. And if that's the case, that actually might not be a good location. And so get professional help with professional commercial real estate people that kind of know what you're trying to achieve and kind of help you think through those issues. One of the things that really is an issue for most small businesses is capitalization of the business. Probably more businesses have failed because of failure to capitalize on the business, to get working capital for the business than anything else. And so you need money to run the business while the business is not profitable, and you may have expenses for the business, or you may have employees that you need to take care of, and you need to have money to be able to do that. You can have a very successful business that has a lot of sales, but if you can't pay the people that are helping you create the product or provide the service, you're ultimately not going to be successful. And then the last thing is the thing I talked about before, which is to be a manager and strategist to understand where the business needs to go, what needs to happen with the business to change, and not just a technician in providing the product or service. And then the last one is a franchise business. So with a franchise, you're basically buying a systematized business that people have been doing and been successful, and they're able to teach you and other people how to do that business and how to be, if you follow their methodology, how to be successful in the business. So there's things like brand recognition, there's training and ongoing support. Excuse me. There's a lot of times people don't think about, they think that the other owners in that business are competitors. And normally that's not the case. Normally they're very willing to help other people that are getting into the business and make them be successful, because they ultimately don't want that brand to be successful. Excuse me, hang on just a second. Excuse me. They ultimately don't want that that brand to be unsuccessful, so they want other people to be successful in the business. And there's oftentimes things like marketing that they can do to help each other. The disadvantages of the business is that you're buying a system. And so if you're going to buy the system, you need to be able to follow the system. And if you're not willing to follow the system, then it's probably not a good business model for you to pursue, because that's what's made other people be successful, and that's what you need to do, at least initially, for you to have an opportunity to be successful as well. Excuse me. And then there's things like the franchise fee and ongoing royalties. So you don't get to keep everything typically that you make. So that may be a concern and issue as well. And whatever you're paying for the royalties, that the support they're providing should be worth the money that you're paying to pay that ongoing royalty. So again, any questions before we move on to kind of about the types of business ownership?
Don't seem to be any questions yet.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to some myths about business ownership. So there's some common misperceptions, I think, about owning a business. So one of them is pursuing your passion. You know, that you have to, if you pursue your passion, you're going to be successful necessarily because you love what it is that you're doing. We'll talk a little bit about consulting and being successful there, because I know a lot of people think about doing that, and there's people that are very successful in doing it. That getting into business is necessarily expensive, and it's also time consuming. So we're going to address each of those briefly. So you've probably heard, you know, do something you're passionate about and you'll never work another day in your life. That's kind of a saying that you hear a lot of people say. So first of all, you know, is there a viable market for that passion that you have? You know, I used to run a lot and thought about doing coaching people that are running. There's probably people that I could coach, but you know, is that something that's going to be a big enough market to really make a living and make a strong business to be able to sustain and enjoy, you know, my career? Do you want your passion to remain your passion? There's a book that I'm going to recommend called The E-Myth Revisited, and I'll put that up here at the end of the presentation. It talks about a lady who loved to bake pies. And if you read the book, you kind of know what happened to that. She loved to bake pies, but when she started making it a business, it quickly became something that she really didn't like to do, because making a business of it and doing it for fun are oftentimes two different things. And you know, if you're going to make a business of it, again, it has to be a business. It's an investment. It's something that you're going to really profit from, both in terms of financially and time and those sorts of things. And it needs to be consistent with that. And then the other thing to think about is, there may be other ways to pursue your passion. So if you like to travel, as an example, you could have a business that's about traveling, but what if you had a business that gave you the time and money that you needed to travel, but you didn't have to make that your business? Would that be an alternative that would be interesting to you? So there are different ways to pursue those passions that you have. And really, if you look at most businesses that successful businesses, they didn't start out as someone's passion. Now, there are some that is true, but most people that are successful have started a business because it fulfills a need in the marketplace, and it is a viable business. It's one that people value, and they're willing to pay for that product or service. And the idea that you're going to do something that you love, that you necessarily love the product or service, is a little bit misleading, because that's not generally why people have done what they've done, and that's not how people have been successful in the business. So I would urge some caution with respect to that. Consulting. A lot of people think about that, and if you have a kind of specialized knowledge, that's great. That may be a potential path for you. What a lot of people don't think about with consulting, though, is you really have two almost equally important hats to wear. One is the technical piece, and I think everybody thinks about that aspect of it, because that's the fun aspect of being able to go in and help people with their business, as example, and help them get better. But business development, getting new clients, filling the pipeline, is almost as important, if not as important, as the technical piece, because clients come and go in consulting. And so you need to have a full pipeline and continue to fill that pipeline. And what you certainly don't want to do is have let's say one mega client, and if that mega client changes, if management changes or something changes within that business, that they don't need your consulting anymore, well, now you're in a bad situation. You need to have connections within the industry or that you would be selling to, because you're, as a consultant, you're in part selling your reputation. And so you need to have people in the industry that you're selling to that know you, that know your capabilities, that are comfortable with the quality of work and the ability that you have that would bring into their companies. Because when people are doing consulting, they're bringing in a consultant because they either don't have the capability in-house, or the capability in-house is not providing the solutions that they need for a problem that they have in their business. You're coming in and solving that problem for them. And so you need to have a champion within that organization that can vouch for you, that you're able to fix that problem, whatever it might be. And then I would have you consider specialized wisdom, not knowledge. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can have knowledge, but the ability to actually apply that knowledge is really more important than it is having the knowledge. So as an example, I have a friend that's been very successful in consulting, and what he does is he will go in and work on or look at a construction project for, let's say, Johnson & Johnson, or a big company that has a plant that is being created, and they are having issues with the scheduling and getting it done on time. And for a big corporation like that, that is a big expense if they don't get it right. And so what he goes in and does is he goes in and evaluates the situation and helps them get a plan to get back on track to meet their schedule. Well, how did he learn that? He learned that from being, he learned project management from DuPont early in his career, But he took that knowledge and he created, by his experience, he created a methodology that actually brings wisdom, not just knowledge, to the situation, and helps, and really helps him be very valuable in helping their client, and so therefore he gets a lot of repeat business and a lot of referrals, and that's kind of where you want to be as well in consulting, is have referrals from previous clients. So those are some things to think about with consulting. Starting a business is expensive. It can be expensive. It kind of depends on the business. There is going to be an investment required. Even if you're starting a business on your own, you will have to put some money into that business to make it, get it off the ground and get it going. So there's really, for a real viable business, there is going to be an investment, some money required. And like any other investment, there is some relationship between what you invest and what you can expect out of it. You may see things all the time, like you can invest $1,000 and make $1 million. If you guys find that, and it's true, you're going to have my email, and I want you to let me know, because I've not found that, but that's kind of the too good to be true. And so there is some relationship between your investment and your outcome on the business. And as we talked about, working capital is important. It's important for the business to make sure that you're able to run that when you may not have enough revenue to exceed expenses. But the other thing to think about is the family. And there are ways to fund the family while the business is starting up. You can't, at some point the business does need to be successful, but for a short period of time, you can fund yourself in addition to the business. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the other thing that we'll talk about in a little bit is ways to fund the business and use other people's money, like a bank loan, to help you start the business, so that you don't have to do it all. And your investment may not be, it's typically going to be a portion, not the entire amount. And lastly, starting a business is time consuming. Well, it can depend on the type of business. There are businesses that you can start without spending 40 hours a week on it. You may just manage the manager of the business. Having said that, when you start a business, you need to be able to spend some time on the business. There's really not a business that you can just open up and go off to the Bahamas and not worry about it. You do have to spend some time, because as the business owner, there's no one that has more interest in that business than you do. So you do need to spend some time in it. But that can vary, and that can vary depending on what you want that to look like. I would encourage you to think about getting appropriate help to focus on the value you bring, and let other people do things that you're not, maybe you can do, but that's not your main focus in the business. So as an example, you may want someone to do the payroll for you, or you may want somebody to do bookkeeping. You even can get help with HR if you have a big enough company. Those may be things that you have some knowledge about, but if the success in the business depends on you going out and selling to clients, or being the face to the clients, you need to spend your time doing that and not doing these other things. And then the last thing is systematizing to the extent possible. If you can create a business where, if you're doing things time after time, or you're dealing with customers time after time, and you can kind of make a system for people to understand how that's to be done, and how it's to be provided, that will help you both manage the business and make the business more successful, because people will know what to expect when they deal with you in your business, because it's always the same, it's always the same quality, etc. And that's what franchises do. They systematize their business so that you have the same experience whether you're in Boston or Buffalo. And so if you can emulate that, that's a help for your business. So in general of business fit, what are your best skills? What are you very good at? Are you good at project management or operations? Are you good at finance? Are you good at marketing and sales? And the business, whatever business you go into, it ought to take advantage of those skills. So in other words, if you as the business owner do those activities well, if that makes the business successful, then that is a good business to take a look at, because you're good at doing it. It aligns with the business and what makes it successful. And so therefore it should make you successful in the business. But another thing to think about is, what skills do you not want to use, even if you're good at them? So I have talked with people that have been very good salespeople. And at this point in their career, they're just tired of selling. They don't really want to sell anymore. That's okay. But you wouldn't want a business where, that it requires you to be part of the sales effort for that business, if that's not what you want to use. So think about what skills you do and don't want to use, and look at businesses that fit those characteristics. Then there's the work-life balance. A lot of us, as we get later in our career, we want to do things outside of what we do to make a living, and that's okay. And some businesses are more or less able to allow you to do that, but you need to think about how important that is to you. Obviously, your financial needs and goals, both short-term and long-term, does the business allow you to have the ability to meet those? And then desired clients. Do you want clients, kind of retail-like clients that could come and go, or do you want a client set, as example, that once you create it and service it, you don't have to build it again? Those are different types of clients. So you need to think about those sorts of things as well. And in terms, just in general, an ideal business, you want it to be recession resistant. We are kind of in a uber recession now, almost a depression, and we'll kind of see how we come out of it. But typically you want something that's recession resistant and something that has repeat business. So as an example, there are businesses that are required by local government. And what that means is that business has repeat business because those other businesses need their help. And as long as those other businesses are in business, they continue to need the help. And so unless they all go under during a recession, that you're still going to need to service them. And so it's recession resistant in that case. You want something that kind of has a low overhead, that you don't have a lot of upfront costs and things that you need to pay for, because whether you're doing well or not doing well, those still exist, but they're lower. That's less of a hurdle. It's nice to have multiple revenue streams. In other words, when you go into a client, you have a variety of things that you can sell to the client that they may need, and they may be complementary to their initial thing that they called you about. So if you can clean windows and do power washing, as kind of a simple example, the client may want you to do both, and you can, when you go in, sell them both of those services and have a bigger invoice, if you will, for them to make more money with a single transaction. As we talked about earlier, you may want to think about the potential for equity or value build in that business, because some are better than others. And that's another way that you can make money, by being the business owner. If a business has value and people are willing to pay for that value, when you sell the business, and if you buy a business, at some point you're likely to want to sell that business for whatever reason. If that business has value, then you're able to take advantage of the business you build up. And that's a nice kind of golden parachute from having owned that business. And you want to have a reasonable break-even point in terms of break-even, both in terms of being profitable in the business and also paying back your investment of the business. We also want to be able to position yourself in the market. So ideally, you want limited competition or a strong competitive advantage in that business. So you either don't have a lot of people that do what you do, or you have what you do has advantages over the competition that you can clearly define to the client, and it's clear to the client that you're better than the other folks that are providing it. Ideally, have some barriers of entry to competition. One way that I've seen people do that is actually do a patent and that's one of the things we did in my prior business, is patent what they do. Or maybe there's licensing that needs to be done that not everybody can do. Those are barriers to entry that prevent just anyone from doing it. We talked about well-defined proposition, value proposition. Why are you different? Why are you better than other people in the field? And then some businesses like franchises, they have marketing that they do for the franchisees. And so they are helping attract customers to the franchisee through the internet and other marketing work that they do. And so you're not having to go out and do that yourself. They're providing that for you. And that's helpful, that you don't have to do it all yourself. And then there's other factors like seasonality of a business. Seasonality is not necessarily a bad thing. If you can make your goals within 8 months and you can take 4 months off and go play because you have the time and the money to do it, that's not a bad thing at all. You just want to make sure that the seasonality doesn't prohibit or limit your ability to grow and continue to expand the business. You don't want technology to make it obsolete. You don't want Amazon to be able to provide it as example, and then people are going to not use you because other people can do it a different way. And you might want to minimize location issues. One way to do that is not to have a business that depends on location, but as we talked about before, if there is a location, you might want to get professional help to help you get the right location. So here's what a lot of people have been waiting for: the funding of a business. How do you fund a business? So there's a variety of ways to fund a business. And the two most popular actually are lending and retirement rollover. So let's talk about those a little bit. Lending basically is a business loan, and you're asking the bank to loan you money to do your business and to start your business. A lot of people go through the SBA to do that. There's a misconception that SBA lending is a government loan. It's actually a loan that is backed by the government that a bank is making. So it's still a bank loan. It's just that the government is usually at 80%, they are backing that loan. So if your business goes under, the bank is covered for that. So it reduces their risk. Now, and you can get a business loan from a bank as well. Different lenders have different appetites for different types of businesses, and oftentimes that's because they've had success in one area or another, and maybe they are not familiar with other areas, so you kind of have to look at that. Right now, there's some advantages because of the COVID issue. If you fund a business before September of this year, the SBA is forgiving 6 months of payment. So that is a very attractive option, probably likely not to happen again in our lifetimes. I hope there's no reason for it to happen. So that's a benefit right now of doing an SBA loan. Another popular way to do it is retirement rollover. So if you have a 401k or IRA, you can roll over the funds into your business without penalty if you do it the right way with the IRS. It's not like a loan. You're actually rolling it into your new business. Because of COVID, there's also an interesting quirk with that. usually you have to create a new retirement in your new company to be able retirement plan in your company to do that. Right now, for a limited time, I think through the end of the year, the government is allowing you to take out retirement funds up to $100,000 without the normal penalty for taking it out early. You still would, I'm pretty confident you're going to have to pay taxes on that money, but you don't have to pay the fee or the penalties for taking it out early. So again, another little quirk on retirement funds that won't be here forever. But those two are very popular in terms of funding a business. There are other ways to do it. So there are asset-based loans. So a portfolio loan, if you have a large portfolio of stocks, as an example, you can take a loan against that portfolio that's very low cost in terms of the interest to fund the business. You also can do a home equity loan to fund the business as well. And then one that's a little bit more exotic is crowdfunding. So there are businesses out there that do crowdfunding for business startup. This isn't like a GoFundMe account where, you know, I need a new set of drums and I want someone to fund me to do that. It's more of people who are looking to invest in businesses that they have some comfort in terms of risk, but maybe for one reason or another, you're not able to get a bank loan. So you can get crowdfunding. That tends to be a little higher in terms of the interest because it's more risky. There's more risk involved with that. So those are kind of the basic ways to fund a business. And you know, you can get funding in this to for a short period of time to fund yourself in addition to funding the business. But you can't do that forever. The business has to be profitable in a reasonable period of time for you to actually make the business pay your salary. So if you're going to start a business, you need to have a business plan, and there are people that can help you with that. We'll talk about in just a minute that can help you fill out and work out a business plan. And that business plan is going to be very important if you're going to go in and get a loan from the bank, because they're going to want to see, what is your plan for the business? What do you expect for it? What are you going to do to make it successful? What are you going to do to reduce the risk in starting a business? As we've talked about several times, I keep hammering on this: working capital for the business and for you to make sure that you can fund it while it's not profitable. You're going to need to think about a corporate structure, and you're going to do that from a couple perspectives. One is legally to protect your assets from the company assets in case there's legal issues there, and also from an accounting standpoint, kind of trying to minimize your taxes and make sure the structure of the business is appropriate for you and your situation. As we talked about before, outsourcing those types of things that maybe you're not good at or that are kind of a necessary evil, but you don't want to spend your time doing it, like bookkeeping, payroll, and HR. There may be licensing associated with a business that you need to be aware of and take care of to start that business. Oftentimes when if you're doing construction type work or home repair, there may be licensing in a state to allow you to do that. And then another thing to understand is know what to watch in the business. What factors or what key indicators are there in your business do you need to watch to make sure that the business is going in the right direction and that you're successful and can continue to be successful? So, is it funding for inventory? Is it the number of people you're talking to a week? Is it the ratings you're getting on Google or Yelp? Those sorts of things. You need to kind of know what's important and what's going to drive the business and keep an eye on those factors, especially if you're doing something kind of as a semi-absentee owner. You really need to know what those are and how to manage those. And then, as I talked about, there's resources to help you that you may or may not be aware of. So there's organizations like SCORE, the Small Business Development Center, and SBA that really are out there to help people start a business. And these are the people that would help you if you're wanting to start an independent business. So if you're doing that business on your own, and you're kind of wanting to know, well, how do I write a business plan for this? How do I market this business? What things do I need to consider about funding? These people are usually, they are volunteers, so there's no cost to use these resources. And they are business people or ex-business people that have experience. And they may have experience in the industry that you are wanting to go into or to sell to. And so they can help you figure out how you need to structure your business and what you need to do to get going. And even if you're doing kind of a smaller scale business, they might be great people to talk to. So in Austin, the Small Business Development Center is tied in with Texas State University. They're usually tied in with the university. So you can look them up online and find those resources and just give them a call and tell them what you're trying to do. What I specialize in is kind of helping people define what characteristics they have and what characteristics they want the business to have to find a good business. And what I specifically do is help them explore the franchise space and find businesses that are a good fit for that with that business model. And about 95% of the people that I work with end up going in something they never would have selected themselves because they just kind of don't know what they don't know in that space. And it's helpful to have someone help you, that does know the space. And so we also talked about earlier the book called The E-Myth Revisited. It's a book that talks about small business ownership and kind of what makes people successful and what makes people fail in that situation. And if you're thinking about that path, you might want to read that book and just kind of get an overview of small business ownership and get an understanding of it. Some people that read that book, they decide, look, yeah, it sounds like a neat idea, but that's just actually not something I want to do. Other people, when they read the book, see, okay, I understand what it's going to take, what some of the challenges it might be, and I'm comfortable with that, and maybe even energized by doing that. So, I would recommend any and all of those resources if you're thinking about doing a business of your own. So, in kind of concluding, business ownership is not for everyone. There is risk in doing a business. There's really nothing you can do that doesn't have any risk in terms of doing a business. But it is an opportunity that maybe is available to you now. Maybe you're in between jobs, and maybe I work with a lot of oil and gas people, as example, and a lot of them have just gotten tired of the roller coaster of bust and boom with the oil industry, and they want something that's more stable. And so I would urge you to think about, both in your traditional career and think about business ownership, think about what you want to do next. Really give that some consideration. What do you want that to look like, and what would make you happy? If we were talking a year from now, what would make you happy with the progress you've made in your career, and where you want to be in your career? And think about the steps to get there, and what next positions will allow you to do that, or if business ownership is an alternative. So I'm going to stop talking now and open up for questions again.
Well, I have a question. We don't have any questions on the chat room yet, but I have a question. You specialize in franchises. Do you have, I'm sure you have statistics as to what percentage of franchise owners business is successful, say, after 5 years?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of flipped. So after 5 years, 70% or so of franchises are still operating. And that's because you're not doing it all on your own. So you have support from the franchisor and other franchisees in helping you be successful. And you're getting kind of a roadmap that has helped other people be successful. And so you're not having to figure everything out on your own. So that just makes it a little more, it makes it more likely, or gives you an opportunity to be successful, that doing something on your own, you can do it, but it may be a little bit more difficult.
And what percentage of franchises go under within the first, I don't know, 3 years?
I don't know exactly what that number is. It does happen, and it happens for a variety of reasons. People sometimes buy the system and they don't follow it. They decide they're going to do their own thing. Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. I'm trying to think of some of my people that have. I had one guy that was he was a pastor, a youth pastor, got in the business, and after 4 months he decided he wanted to go back and do that, and so he didn't carry on. So I don't know what the exact number is, but there's and it happens, and there's a variety of reasons why it does happen.
Right. Someone asked if you can clarify the use of a home equity loan to fund a business, and he says, did I hear correctly that is permitted?
I would check. The only issue I would be concerned with home equity in Texas is they can take your home if you go under. And so that may have some restrictions in terms of using that in Texas. Because they're looking at that as that's an asset-backed loan. And if you default on that loan, then they have to have some assets to go back towards. So you might want to check on that to make sure it would work.
Okay. And then there's a question about, do you have any statistics at all on non-franchise independent businesses?
Statistics in what regard?
I assume their success rate.
Well, as I said before, the statistics the percentage kind of varies, but a lot of them, I'm trying to remember, there's like 40% fail within the first 3 years and like 50% fail within 5 years. A lot of that, frankly, is funding and financing because they don't capitalize for the long term. But other than that is just because you're having to get operations, marketing, sales, and all that right to be successful. And if you don't get one of them successful for one reason or another, that may take the ship down. And so you have to think through those things and make sure that you can do them right, that you get help to do them right. If that's not your area, you have to consider all of those things.